Yo, what's good? Welcome back to another episode of Levitation Sundays. Here at Higher, we focus every area of our lives with the intent of us reaching God's higher calling. And today is no different. But before we begin, listen, I need y'all to go down there and press that subscribe button. Go ahead and do it. And while you're down there, go ahead and hit the like button. Like it. And then leave a comment. Let us know how you feel about today's message. And then the most important thing, I ask that you share it with those who you think will benefit the most from it. Just share it. Just share that thing. Send out links in the messages. Send out links in the DMs. I think what God is doing and what God is saying, I think a lot of people need to hear it and get this healthy call from God. So go ahead and do those things. Subscribe, like, comment, and share. Now with all that out the way, let's hop into it. I hope this bless you. We are going forward with the third part of the Restore series. Yes, that is right. The third part. What was the first two parts, just in case you ain't see them? The first part was recognition. We have to recognize who we are and who God called us to be. The second part was explanation. This is where we get the understanding of why our situations may be broken. I don't know if y'all noticing, but the R in Restore is recognition. The E in Restore is explain. That leads us to the third step, and the S in Restore is surrender. And this is a tough part because it's one thing to recognize who you are and recognize the degree of your situation. And it's another thing to gain the explanation and the understanding of why you're going through what you're going through. But then it's a whole nother thing to surrender. And it's a requirement for restoration. Why? Because in our key scripture of this entire series, it says, if my people who are called by my name shall humble themselves, seek my face, and turn from their wicked way. The turning from your wicked ways is an act of surrendering. It's an act of I give up what I naturally want to do. And I'm turning and I'm surrendering and I'm following the guidance of the one who can restore my broken situation. But without fully surrendering, that can be the reason why our lives still resemble brokenness. We still want control. We still want a little bit of say-so in dictating where our lives go. We still want to be the judge of what's right and what's wrong. If we still want that control, we haven't fully surrendered. And in order to fully surrender, there is a process that is required, that is in the key scripture, that helps us to understand how to surrender. The first point is humble yourself. The key scripture says, if my people who are called by my name shall humble themselves. Humbleness is that first step to actually surrendering. Do you know that even when our situation looks broken, we are in broken relationships, our finances are broken, our friendships are broken, our faith is broken, do you know we still have the nerves to continue to operate in pride? In today's modern society, we have this thing that enhances our pride. That specific thing is called social media. This is a tool that encourages us to continue to operate in pride. All of the areas of our lives can be broken, yet we will still post on social media as if nothing is wrong. Why? Because we have to maintain a specific image. This act of pride prevents us from fully surrendering because we still feel like we have to have control over how we look, how we're perceived. So instead of turning to God, we rely on our own strength. But the prerequisite was that my people humble themselves. Why must we be humble? Well, God tells us all throughout scripture how he feels about pride. Specifically, in 1 Peter chapter 5, starting at verse 5, it says, and all of you dress yourself in humility as you relate to one another. For God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. So humble yourselves under the mighty power of God. And at the right time, he will lift you up in honor. Scripture tells us that as children of God, we must clothe ourselves in humility. And when we walk in humility under God, at the right time, he will lift us up. So what does humility look like? This scripture gives us a fuller definition or fuller viewpoint of how we should operate in humility. In Philippians chapter 2, starting at verse 3, it says, don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. You must have the same attitude that Christ had, Though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges. He took the humble position of a slave and was born as a human being. When he appeared in human form, he humbled himself in obedience to God and died a criminal's death on a cross. So this scripture gives us insight on what humility actually looks like, not only by telling us what we should do or what mindset we should have in regards to other people, but then he gives us the perfect example of Christ. It says, think of people as if they are better than you. He's not saying that people are better than you. What he is saying, though, don't be concerned with yourself more than you're concerned with others. And that could potentially be a reason why we do have broken relationships. We're so concerned of what's being fulfilled on my end, or we're so concerned of what I'm getting from a relationship that we're not focusing on what can I be giving to the other person. And that's in family, that's in friends, that's in partnership, that's in business. That can be a direct reflection of why some of those relationships are broken, is because we're not being humble. Then he gives us the example of Christ, where it says Christ, who is God, like he's God, didn't think equality to God was something to hold on to, meaning he didn't think that was something to flaunt around, but he wanted to serve us so much. He thought about our interests so much so that he came down in a human body, a God coming down in a human body, dealing with all of our illnesses, all of our limitations, all of our temptations. And then he died a criminal's death when he didn't do anything. And he went to that extreme because he is humble. And that humbleness caused him to have a desire to serve our interests for our salvation on his behalf. That is the greatest definition of what humility is. He had the power and the strength to overcome everything that we can't. He didn't have to go through it, but he went through it on our behalf. That's humbleness. So when God says, if my people who are called by my name should humble themselves, what he's talking about, get rid of your ego. Get rid of that pride, because it's the pride that got your situations broken. It's the pride that causes you not to be able to steward over your finances well. It's pride that causes a lot of the brokenness in our lives. And the first step to surrendering is that we have to surrender that pride. So how do we go against our nature? He says, if my people who are called by my name shall humble themselves, seek my face. The second step is seeking my face. You have to seek his face. When we are seeking something, that means we are giving our attention to it. We have to surrender our attention to God. We have so many things that's fighting for our attention. And God is like, if you keep giving your attention to areas that's broken, they're going to remain broken. But if you shift your attention and seek my face, the result of that is the healing of your brokenness. The reason why we unfortunately step into sin, whether intentionally or unintentionally, is because we have stopped seeking God's face. We stopped seeking his standards. We stopped giving him our undivided attention. And when we stop doing that, we drift into areas that pulls us further and further away from God. And unintentionally, without us even noticing, what has our attention? What have we been actually seeking more than we've been seeking God? That's a question worth investigating, because if we've been seeking the wrong thing, that can potentially be the reason why we are experiencing so much brokenness. In Psalms 105, verse 4, it says, look to the Lord and his strength. Seek his face always. The writer of this song is expressing a need. What's attached to looking at the Lord? His strength is. We need his strength in order to protect what he provides in our lives. Because without his strength, we don't have the power to maintain it. Without him, we don't have the ability to be the best husbands. Without him, we don't have the ability to be the best businessmen or women. Without him, we don't have the ability to be the best sons, the best mothers, the best fathers. Without him, we don't have the strength to do nothing. So it's important that we look to him, because in him is the strength for us to be able to maintain the things that he has graced and he has blessed us with. And then Jesus tells us the secret in this one verse in Matthew chapter 6, starting at verse 33, it says, "But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." If we put all of the things before him, we'll inevitably neglect the skill set and the ability to maintain those things. But if we seek him and his righteousness, not only will we be given the things that we want, but we'll also be given the strength to maintain it. Christ tells us what should be the first priority in our attention, where we should be placing our attention, and that's in God and his righteousness. It's not a coincidence. God is saying, after you humble yourself, you have to redirect your attention to me. When we redirect our attention to him, we're getting further and further in the surrendering process. This leads us to the third point. Okay, we know we have to be humble, and we know we have to seek his face. In the process of seeking his face, we learn his standards. We gain his righteousness. We gain the strength to live differently. And in the process of that, when we come to a understanding of what's right and what's wrong in God's eyesight, then he requires us to turn away from our wicked ways. The key scripture again says, "If my people who are called by my name shall humble themselves, seek my face, and turn from their wicked ways." Turning from your wicked ways is surrendering your will. It's saying, I want to do this, but because it doesn't please you, God, I'll turn away from it. We have a choice to either go along with God's will or go against it. Whenever we go against his standards, because God is holy, he's righteous, and he's good, we automatically get placed in the category of the opposite of good, which is wicked. Like, we don't understand a lot of his standards and his principles. And so we come up with our own concept of what is good in our eyesight. So even when we do certain things and it may feel good, don't mean that it's good. But the way that we know that we are in alignment with God, if we surrender our will to his will, and that looks like turning from your wicked ways, turning from the thing that you inevitably want to do, but because it doesn't line up, I'm going to choose you, God. Jesus himself modeled this when he says in Luke chapter 22, verse 42, he says, "Father, if you are willing, please take this cup of suffering away from me. Yet I want your will to be done, not mine." This lets us know that Jesus had a different will. He was completely submitted and surrendered to the Father. If he would have went along with his will, which in our eyes seems to be a good thing, you want to stay alive. If he would have went forward with that, that would have inevitably put him in the category of wickedness because it was against the will of God. How many things have we done that in our eyes seem good? It made sense. It went along with how the world works. But if we really had to look at how God wanted us to operate, which we have to read his word, how many of those good things would have went against his standard? This is what it looks like to surrender to God. And when we surrender to God, we jump that process to be restored again. Not just restoration in our finances, not just restoration in our relationship, not just restoration in all of the subcategories of what's important. Surrendering jumpstarts the restoration to the relationship with God, because it's only when we're connected with him that we are truly walking in our destiny. And a lot of the reason why we experience unnecessary obstacles in our lives is because we have disconnected. But when we surrender back to God, we're taking a step closer to the one who can restore all of our brokenness. This is Levitation. Man, I'm so happy and I'm so excited for what God is doing and what God is calling his people back to. And I hope this message bless you. But we got some more steps, and you got to tune in next week for the next steps in the process. I'm praying for y'all, and I hope y'all stay blessed.